we're discussing about the lasting stories. And I would say be honest that if you think you are, if you think you aren't, do you consider yourself writing those kind of stories that will last, or do you just see yourself as
I don't
that
know.
temporary?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I'm.
I mean, to be honest, no one.
No one knows.
No, like, let's just use
But
a
okay,
cliche.
but
Let's
see, the
just
whole point, like the whole idea, not the whole idea, but part of the idea, I think, or part of the appeal of putting a novel down is that it will live on after you and there will be an imprint of you.
yeah.
The thing is, no one knows when they do it if what they do is going to be worth it. If it's actually going to achieve that.
Yeah. I mean, like, to list, like, I'm pretty sure. I mean, maybe it was the goal. It's usually always the goal to achieve that, but like to use the tried and true examples, like like Dickens, Hemingway, all those people who we still talk about to this day. Did they know, or not even, or did they just be like, like let's just say, did they think this work's going to be what I'm remembered for, or they're just like, that was okay. Like, I want to say Orwell viewed all of his works as failures. So, like, obviously he probably didn't be like, oh yeah, people are going to be talking about 1984, an Animal Farm, well into the 21st century.
Yeah.
Or like, and sometimes like it's not even what's in the novel that creates its longevity. Sometimes it's the controversy behind either the publication or something that's in it that's taboo or whatever that caused some kind of commotion amongst people.
Well, that's why I don't know if you ever read Lady Chatterley's Lover.
No.
By D.H. Lawrence, but part of why that book has been so it's not as well known as 1984. It's not even as well known as The Outsiders. But it was banned in the United States and the United Kingdom and in a lot of other countries up until the 60s because of its content. Like, it was one of the first really sexually explicit novels that was out for public consumption.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't just distributed on the black market when it was first published. It was after it was published and people started reading it that this controversy came out. So that, like, in terms of, like you said, longevity and the content, like, that's one of the examples. Like, sometimes you don't know what's going to hit or what's going to stir or what's going to miss until you just tell the story. And that's the thing that I feel like is missing from a lot of creative endeavors these days. Everybody's trying to hop into that creative market because they either want a piece of that immortality or they want some of the money that goes with it.
Or the notoriety or fame.
And it's like, no, just say what needs to be said, not what you think is going to get the most reaction, but the thing that needs to be said.
Yeah.
It's like Upton Sinclair became famous because he was telling the truth. Because he was saying things that needed to be said, and it was upsetting for a lot of people. So, like, I I don't know that his aim was for notoriety or that his aim was to become that kind of household name that we still talk about him in high school.
Yeah.
But that's what he became because of what he was doing. So, like, don't be like Orwell and just assume that it's a failure, but tell the story, like, assume it's a market failure. Tell the story that needs to be told. Don't.
So this brings up, not to cut you off, but this kind of brings up like an interesting question as to, because we've talked about like, why the assumptions that we assume people write, be it the notoriety, the money, something. Mm-hmm. So let me just ask the question to you. Do you know why you write? Like, is there some kind of push or pull?
I know why I write. I've known why for a very long time. And it's never, for me, it's never been this thing, being famous or being notorious or having the next great American classic. I don't care about that. That doesn't mean anything to me.
So what does matter to you, though? Is it just telling the story? Is it?
When I was a kid, I had a very overactive imagination. I still do. But there was no one that I could share that with. Like, I had a friend, and half the time that we communicated, we couldn't communicate because we were on two different levels. So, for me, when I first started, writing was a way for me to just express all of this energy. It was like I was a battery, and my imagination was just all of this stored energy inside that had nowhere to go. And so when I started putting these things down onto paper when I was a little kid, like, that was the outlet for that imagination. That was the only place it could go. And then as I got older and as, my thinking evolved and became a little more complex, it got to the point that paper was the only thing I could say that to. Couldn't say to anybody else. Because I didn't have anyone to talk to. So, and now as an adult, because I've always liked stories, I've always, and I like telling stories. But a lot of that is those initial reasons for writing, that overactive imagination, because it's still there, and that need to say something, to acknowledge a problem, or to address, a situation that's also still there. And so it's just combined into this thing where it's in every single story that I write, whether it makes it to print or not. Mm-hmm. I have stuff that I think, and there's no one to say it to, so I have to put it onto paper, and when I tell the story well enough, I'll publish it.
Okay. So because you say, like, you've got things to say, and obviously you mentioned the whole, overactive imagination, which, again, I'll reiterate, I feel like I'm lacking in the imagination area.
You've got a good imagination. I wish I had your imagination.
No, you don't. You really don't. So, like, you're saying, like, you, again, sort of reading that, telling the big through the small and vice versa. How do you decide, okay, I've got this thing to say, I'm going to tell it through this lens? for instance, like, what did you want to say with How to Cure, and how did you choose, okay, this is the story, the fiction that I'm going to use to tell either what I'm wanting to say or the problem I'm trying to solve? What made you decide, okay, these characters, this story is how I'm going to craft all of this around my main point?
It wasn't so clinical as that. Like the story, the things that I talked about, what I talked about in How to Cure, you know, that those philosophical elements that are just going to weave themselves into anything that I do.
Mm-hmm.
It was best described that way. Do you follow?
Yeah.
Like it was because that's what it's relevant to.
Mm-hmm.
Though, you know, it's the young people, it's the young that suffer because the adults are too busy hacking away at each other, and they've forgotten that their kids exist. Or the parents are so busy trying to pursue this concept of glory, this false sense of glory, that they're willing to just feed their kids to this thing that really wants to destroy the whole kit and caboodle. But, you know, it's happy to start with your kids because it can twist your kids. And it can warp them. And if you're going to leave your kids out in the woods, you can't be surprised when they come back to kill you. You can't. And that's something that I've seen, and part of why I put it inside that political context is because that's where it's the most prevalent. That's where you see it happen the most. You've got you've got mothers who are demonizing their sons because they could be rapists. You've got conservative parents demonizing their children for being slightly liberally minded. You know, and all of this, like, and so they you know, they treat their kids like commodities. They treat them like problems or trophies, or, you know, they groom them. They want to groom them to be something, and because of human nature being what it is, the kids don't want to be that. They're their own individual person, and so they can't be that thing that mom and dad want them to be. Yeah. So you've got all of these people, and it's such a problem in today's society. It's not just conservative, it's also liberal, and it's also libertarian, and it's also centrist. Like, they all do this, where they just feed their kids into this monster that wants to destroy everything. But it's going to start with your kids, and it's going to warp your kids until your kids come back to destroy you because of your own selfishness. And it was something that I observed as a teenager. It was something that I observed as a preteen. It was something that I've been observing since I turned 20. And it's bothered me for a really long time. And the only way for me to tell that story was to tell it from that perspective, where, you know, yeah, you've got a whole generation of child soldiers. You've got people who have been primed to hate and to destroy based on an ideology. But the thing is, that's going to end up eating itself, and it's going to come back to eat the people who let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's what How to Cure was meant to be. You know, that was the only way to tell that story, was to just take that real world thing that's going on and just put it into a fictional sense like this.
Yeah.
I don't know if I over answered that question.
I mean, some might say, you know, yeah, she rambled for a bit, but you get your point across at least, and you do sort of reiterate certain points, but as you've witnessed with my writing style, I like to reiterate points to death.
Well, if people got it on the first time, you wouldn't have to say it more than once, would you?
No.
I know, it happens to me too. Like, if you don't tell me to do something 50 times, I'm gonna forget.
Yeah. And but like with your explanation, I feel like from what little I've read of, I guess you could say, modern literature in terms of like it was released in the past 5 years, I feel like that's lacking that depth. I feel like, and even books that sort of try to market themselves as being deep, think pieces, are even lacking in that area, like where they're tackling that ideology or that concept.
But that's the thing about what I did with How to Cure. Like, I can't really market it as being that solution because I don't know if it is.
Yeah, no.
This is just something that's been pent up inside my head for a really long time, and I had to get it out because there was no one else to say it to. Nobody but the paper gave a shit.
Yeah.
Why do you write?
I mean, it's evolved through the years. Like, first couple novels was more sort of catharsis. I was going through quite a bit that just needed, like, kind of like you. I mean, except it wasn't paper; it was the laptop screen. Only the laptop screen seemed to give a shit.
Yeah.
You're working through, the death of friends, the death of friendships, that sort of, you witness, a marriage fall apart in front of you, and in that sort of domino effect, the family dynamic sort of crumbles because it's like, well, now you're no longer one unit, you're now split. So like I was kind of, obviously first novel I wrote, Division Street, obviously because there was a lot of division, there was divide amongst friends, family, everything. It wasn't until I started writing Arcadia that I was very focused. See, and this is where it's like you and I sort of differ in like I guess the goal of our writing is maybe not. Maybe me explaining this will sort of reveal that it's actually quite similar. I'm not seeking a solution. I'm more seeking, I guess, an answer for myself. Like, because in Arcadia, the main focus is memory. Like, what is, like, if you look back on past memories, but some memories are some memories you can recollect, and it's vivid. Like, you remember smells, you remember tastes, and then some are so foggy, so spotty that it kind of feels like I'm like, well, is that a memory or is that just like an old dream that I'm remembering?
Yeah.
And there were even like days where I'd wake up and even the memories I remember vividly, I kind of started asking myself, like, well, are those memories real or were they just supplanted there? And this is my first day actually being awake or alive. And everything else is just sort of this artificial construct to make me believe that I've been alive longer than I have. So it was sort of like this weird kind of crisis I was going through, especially considering, my family history of, memories either not being there anymore, or you're getting the wrong memory, you're remembering things wrong. So that was sort of my focus. Sort of, it was my way of like, if I can somehow work through these fictional characters' memories and try to find something solid for them, hoping in some way, like try to basically quelling a fear that I won't remember.
Mm.
And then with False Cathedrals, my focus with that was more sort of, instead of looking in the mirror and trying to find an answer, I finally sort of turned the mirror on the reader at this point. Like, this is what you're doing. And if it keeps going, in some ways we're already there in some regards to the book. But if we keep going, like, we're just going to become more disconnected. We're gonna, like, we praise social media, we praise all these things for like, oh, we're as connected as ever, but we're also as fragmented as ever.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can text someone, but at the end of the day, those are just words on a screen. At the end of the day, whatever you watch on TV is meant to entertain. It's not meant to broaden some aspect of your mind.
Right.
Even to the point of like especially with the obsession nowadays with, like, you know, the serial killer documentaries and those like cold case files that they talk about, like they solve them or whatever, like the first 48 hours. We're so obsessed with tragedy and living vicariously, like especially, like, let's just use a tried and true but tired example, Ted Bundy. There's this fascination with him.
Yeah.
And it's like, but why? And also, I start like, why do we remember their name? Name me one victim. Name me one victim of any serial killer. You can't. Why do we put this focus on essentially monsters, I guess, to simplify it? But those who deserve to be remembered, those whose lives were taken early, they're just footnotes. They're just tallies. So,
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is? It's a combination of like fear with a little bit of fascination. Like, the fear is like if I remember him, if I remember not just the name, but like the vibe that the person gives off. Like, for instance, like, you know, you look at, you know, either Ed Gein or Bundy, or but there are some killers out there that, you know, you would want to sit down and have a conversation with. But, like, you know, it's the monsters, like Kemper, like. But it's the ones that you can just tell by looking in their eye there's something fucking wrong. Like, you remember, I'm like, if I can, maybe you remember the name, not because it's like, oh, Ted Bundy will come back, obviously he's dead. But it's like, if I remember the aspects of him, I can see the signs later and learn. But, like, you can't learn from a victim. They obviously, for lack of a better word, failed at noticing. So, like, why would I want to remember them and potentially like become them?
It's not so much, and everybody talks about how it's, you know, it's about glorifying them, but in reality, for what it seems like, what you're saying is that it's more self-preservation.
It's more of a survival mechanism. Like, if I remember,
which is something that I've been thinking for a while too. Like, it's not about glorifying them. It's about knowing what that threat looks like so that you can deal with it later on.
Yeah. But I feel like with a lot of people, especially with with the ease of access that we have to all this stuff now via Netflix, Hulu, Prime, it's sort of lost that survival instinct and it's just become more of like, oh, Oh, I hope they kept
it. It's less about survival and it's more about that animalistic satisfaction of seeing something bleed. Because there's an aspect of predator in everything on this earth.
Yeah. And
like for anything to live, something else has to die. And you have to be like, there's a section of your animal brain that has to be okay with something dying so that you can live.
Yeah.
That's why vegans are full of shit.
There you go. That's
true. These people, no cruelty to animals, but, so they only eat plant source materials. But do you know what goes into harvesting plant materials? Do you know how many rabbit families have died for your fucking soybeans? And that's the truth. You want to talk about no cruelty to animals, you don't know what happens to the animals in the field. You don't know, because you ain't harvesting and you ain't growing your own food. Anyway, vegans and Picasso.
But but there's also other topics that I wanted to tackle other than just the idea of serial killers. I tackle suicide, which everyone likes to say if only I had known you could have done something.
No, you couldn't have.
No, you couldn't have. But I also sort of tackle both sides of there's going to be the person who's open to talking about their thoughts, and then there's going to be the person who there's an aversion, they're going to act like everything's fine. They're going to you ask them the question well, are you thinking about killing yourself? And I'm like, oh, don't be stupid, when in reality it's yeah.
It's there was this God, poetry, spoken poetry, one of those fucking things. You've heard of Neil Hilborn, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he did a poem at one of these events, and one of the lines from it, he's talking about suicide, and he goes, it wasn't a planned thing. It was just the exit sign over the door to a show that hasn't been quite bad enough to leave. And for a lot of people, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Of course they think about killing themselves.
But and then there's there's plenty of things that I wanted, but it was more, False Cathedral was just more of I don't want to say I try to be preachy, but I basically was saying this is how we are, and it needs to change. We need to, and I hate saying this because you know me, but I use the connection that we've become so attached to technology that we've lost the spirituality of life. So I use, basically, even though I'm not a religious person myself, we need to go back to basics. Which,
well, even Nietzsche said that.
Yeah.
Nietzsche was basically if not the father of modern atheism, at least one of its front runners.
Yeah.
And that was what that whole phrase,
God is dead.
God is dead. That wasn't a celebration.
No.
He was lamenting the death of organized religion. Because if you don't, if you don't understand that there's a greater consequence to your behavior, if you don't appreciate that greater consequence to your behavior, there's no reason not to behave like an animal. And what I said in How to Cure was theft is animalistic.
Yeah.
Adultery is animalistic. Killing it's an instinct. There's no animal in the natural world that considers that wrong.
Yeah.
The point that, like, the reason humans and animals are different is because we have a moral code that overrides that instinct. And part of what spirituality does, whether you're a believer or whether you're just clinically accepting of organized religion, part of what it maintains civilization. Because without that, like Nietzsche said, there's no reason for us not to descend into just animal behavior.
Yeah.
Not to hijack what you were saying. Sorry.
No, it's fine. But I mean, again, I really feel like I haven't answered the question of like why I write while trying to answer. I don't know. I just,
there's a lot going on upstairs.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, to put it in the most simplest terms, I guess, is bringing it back to where, there's the people who write for the escapism and all that stuff is, you've read Arcadia. That's not a world you want to escape into.
It's an enjoyable book, though. Like, I've read it more than once. As enjoyable as a book like that can be.
Yeah.
I should say. It's because it's a good story to tell. Not the most escapism story, like you said.
Or even uplifting.
No, not particularly.
You're kind of been on a low note.
It does hit a chord, because there are aspects of our lives, I think, where some of us wonder, is that really real, or did I just imagine it? Is that a false memory? How much of what I know and how much of what I believe is a construct given to me by something else?
Yeah. Well, and it's also like, I was also sort of thinking when I started writing Arcadia was like I don't have siblings. So like when both my parents are gone, the only memories of my parents that I have are mine. I don't have shared memories like you do with your siblings.
No.
So I can't so as in that sense, my memories, while still subjective because they're still just mine, since I have no one else to split or share them with, in a sense they kind of become objective because it's just my point of view that I'm seeing, as opposed to like an older sibling to be like, oh no, that's not what happened, like, to kind of correct. So, but also in a way like that makes my memories in a sense flawed because I don't have that outside camera of another sibling to be like, well, no, you're remembering it wrong, and then make that correct course of action or remembrance. So like, but I am still kind of like I can look back on memories of my childhood as an adult and sort of correct that view, like maybe feelings of lament towards a parent are now kind of viewed like, well, now as an adult having to, work, I understand why Dad was tired, why he didn't play with me as often, because he was exhausted. Dude drove for hours.
Right.
So like, I don't know. Yeah, no. But like I was saying, like, I don't write for that escapism. I guess I write to sort of hit a nerve, like hoping to hit a nerve. like, kind of, sort of, even though there will be people who I never interact with who do read my work, it's sort of like this weird feeling, or this weird pursuit that will never be satisfied, to hear from a reader like, I felt this way as well, or I feel this way as well.
Solidarity.
Yeah. Like, and maybe someone who reads False Cathedrals or Arcadia or any future work will read whatever it was I was feeling in that moment and also feel it, but also go like, well, and then that reader will be like, well, at least I'm not alone.
Right.
Because in that moment when I was writing it, I did feel alone. Like that it was me who was just feeling that
yeah,
like when someone dies, like a family member, and like a decade goes by, and like you'll have your moments where you can almost remember what they sounded like when they talked, but you can't quite remember their laugh, you know. So it's sort of that like second, it's like that second death of a family member, because you're starting to lose that ability to bring them to the forefront of your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I don't have that experience with a family member, but I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've known people who have died. Like when I was a kid, there was an older gentleman who I knew I was very fond of, and he was kind of like a grandpa. And then he died when I was 6, and now I can barely remember what he looked like.
Yeah.
I remember his name. His name was Jim Royton.
Yeah.
But I can barely remember what he looked like. I can barely remember his voice or his laugh.
And that's actually the fact that you brought up like you remember his name. That's where I think it's chapter 4 of False Cathedrals, that's how it opens. It's like a name. All she had was a name to carry with her.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's her father who's dead, and like she's slowly started to forget aspects of him. But so like I guess that was just, it's just my way of sort of like hoping that I can convince myself as I'm writing this that I'm not the only one who feels or concerns themselves with these thoughts. But
you having a nightmare, doggo? You having a nightmare?
maybe that's why I write, and it sort of is the hope that something that I produce, because we kind of, as a species, have lost the capacity to feel. Like we live in a just bring up like Tinder and whatever dating apps. Like you're swiping. There's no emotional connection. You don't feel anything. Like basically sex and emotions have just become simple mathematics. Like yes, no, this is the answer. This is not what I want, kind of thing.
It's that animal thing.
Yeah, and I guess the reason why I write is that I want to remind people what it's like to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's my overall goal as to why I keep writing, is there's got to be again, like I said, returning to the basics of like let's return back to our desire to feel something other than satisfaction. Like let's be like it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel something, just something. It doesn't have to be a positive emotion. It doesn't have to be, proactive. It doesn't have to be promoting something. Like it's just as long as you feel something. Allow yourself to cry. Allow yourself to do something. Just feel. Fuck.
Yeah. It's that unwillingness to feel.
Yeah.
Because because to feel is to be human, to acknowledge a feeling and to know, give it a name,
and to allow yourself to be vulnerable.
That's
like humans have become so guarded. We've become so guarded as a just in culture in general. Like, tear down not to use Pink Floyd's analogy, but tear down the wall kind of thing. Like, don't live behind this isolation, especially nowadays.
Oh yeah, that's more relevant now than ever, almost, I think.
Like don't be afraid to reach out to make a connection.
Well, and that's another thing that reduces you to that dumb animal state, is that constant sense of fear. That something is out to get me, something is out to get you. It's no, it's just, it isn't out to get you, it just is.
Yeah.
Whether you live or whether you die, it just is. It's not necessarily a design. Don't be afraid of it. And don't be afraid to feel that. It's that sense of self-awareness. And I think you know this as well as I do. Like, that sense of self-awareness can be deeply overwhelming.
Yeah.
To the point that I don't blame everyone else for wanting to escape it, but at the same time, it's like there comes a point when you can't anymore and you have to face it head on. Or this thing that you feel is destroying you will actually come back to destroy you.
Yeah. But I feel like we're getting to that point where we're never gonna face it, and our fears will come back and destroy us.
I think for some people that's true. I think for a segment of our population that's very true.
Yeah.
I think for the other half,
hopefully on the upswing.
I feel like for the other half it is on the upswing. And I do think to a degree that that's been one of the benefits of this virus. As much as people say as much as people want to say they've been traumatized by this virus, I don't think they have been. I think they've just been shaken awake. Because now a lot of people know what's valuable to them.
Yeah, like
people give a shit about what their kids are learning.
Yeah, and we have more of an appreciation for what we used to have.
Right. Well, and then there's been the defining of our culture.
Yeah.
What makes us us? Because everybody's supposed to go to their houses and hide. But so if that's the uniform solution, The rejection of that, the individual rejection of that, is what's been making up the culture.
Yeah.
And so now you've got a definition of values, and now you've got a definition of culture and identity. And that's not a bad thing. That's a very good thing, because we're not all uniform. We're human beings. Each one with his individual soul. And it's that denial of that soul and that denial of that feeling and that culture, that's what makes us so dead. Seems to me like in a lot of ways, false cathedrals and how to cure are kind of parallels in ways that we didn't intend for them to be.
No. Especially considering that, we're not really a collaborative
No,
bunch.
we're not. Well, it's also funny because, you are the devout atheist and I am the reluctant Christian.
Yeah. You forgot born again. I'm a devout born again atheist.
You're a born again atheist?
I was born without God.
Oh, yes. Born again because you were raised Mormon. That's right.
Yes, I was born without a God. I was forced to God. And then I was like, not liking that God. I'm gonna block his number.
Oh, that's cute. I don't blame you. I'm the believer, and there are days when it's just like,
leave me alone. Do not disturb.
Supposedly there's a plan. Do we at least get to know what it is? No? Okay. There is a plan. It's just a surprise.
Well.
Okay. What if I don't like surprises? That's part of what that conversation came from. There is that little bit of that conversation that Turney has with the voice.
Yeah.
What she said, she's like, I don't like surprises. He goes, if you think you're going to mitigate my surprises, you're going to be awfully surprised. Stop it. It doesn't work.
But
You call it the imaginary voice.
Hey, we all gotta make a name for something.
Well, something. If that's what makes me schizophrenic, then you can't harass me for it.
Get help. I'm not harassing you. I'm trying to help you.
Your help is ruining my quality of life. I'm glad you're doing fine without your imaginary friend, but me and some other people have to talk to the sky for a little bit, okay? Thank you.
It's fine. You worship something that, possibly isn't there.
And you've decided to ignore something that possibly is. So it seems to me like we both don't really know.
I will give thanks to what I can see that gives me life, and that is the sun.
Not your mom, since she gave birth to you?
That was only one day.
I feel like you don't get enough sun to justify being a sun worshiper, George Carlin.
I go outside plenty, actually. I just don't tan. I just don't tan. I burn. I don't tan.
Are you ginger?
At
heart, because you have no soul?
Pretty much. Did you ever watch that video, by the way?
No, I didn't. What was it called? Angry Ginger?
Just look up Angry Ginger.
Okay.
Not right now, but like...
Well, I'm going to pause this because we're at 50 minutes.
I was going to say, we still haven't even, like...
This has just been us going off about why we write and what we're thinking. And honestly, not that there's a whole lot of that needs to be edited out, but that would make up a majority of the video.
Yeah, this video could literally be titled "Why We Write."
Mm.
We kind of do cover like why others write too, like the escapism and the notoriety, fame, bullshit.
But I feel like a lot of people know that about themselves, and they just don't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah. It's usually the ones who like to either compare themselves to, say, their favorite author, or like when asked the question, like, if you could be compared to any author, who would you want to be compared to? And they usually go like, I'd want to be compared to Stephen King. Or Neil Gaiman.
Can
never say his name right because
I don't. When I was a teenager,
I want to be just like John Green.
When I was a teenager, there were authors that I did emulate, and I wanted to remind people of those authors when I wrote. But the older I've gotten and the more I've evolved, because I have evolved as a writer.
Are you sure? No, I've seen your work from 8 years ago, and How to Cure has evolved.
Infinitely better. Leaps
and bounds better. No offense to 8-year younger you.
No, that's the thing. Like you're not. Hopefully, in another 8 years, I'm better than what hopefully, How to Cure looks like shit. That's the idea, is to improve on the craft. Like, if you're going to develop a craft, like, your reasons for developing the craft and then the implementation of the craft are not the same thing.
Yeah.
But if you're really, like, if your reasons are really that, not pure, but, like, just, if you're really that decided, then for fuck's sake, give the craft the attention it deserves. So hopefully in another 8 years, I'm better than what I am today. I forgot what I was.
I would say, like, and if you ever hit a point where you've kind of plateaued, find a different way to improve, experiment with the form.
And yeah, tell the story in a different way.
Like, if you've written 3, 4, or 5 novels the same way, and you feel like, it's a little better, but it's not.
I want to, do something different.
Yeah, work with telling the story in a different way, or even just experiment with the form. Like,
well, it's no different. It's no different than painters playing with pigment.
Yeah, or even composing a piece of music. Like, you'll always have your voice, like, with playing it. Like, it'll always sound like you, like something you wrote. But like, you can say you primarily work in the major key. Maybe try the minor. Maybe work with some sus2 chords. Like, do something beyond the power chord. Get out of that punk mindset. Use an open chord. Use something. But it'll still sound like you at the end of the day. It's just you trying something new.
I forgot what got me onto that subject.
We were talking about, you should always improve. You should always feel like that. And then if
there was something that came before that.
8 years ago, we were talking about How to Cure has vastly improved from when you were, I want to say,
19
to 27.
There was something that led into that. I can't remember what it was. Okay, I'm going to stop this here.
Okay.
So that we could just take a breather. Because we kind of went real hard there for a minute.
Yeah. Well, because you and I kind of have a way of, like, knowing the answer, but unable to articulate it in a concise way. Like we kind of.
Well, that's the point of a conversation, though.
Exactly. Well, that night I kind of went on this because I mean, yeah, you've written novels beforehand, but like you don't really talk about those previous novels. You simply were focusing on How to Cure, as to where it's like I kind of like went back to the embryonic stage.
I didn't publish those novels.
Well, yeah,
and it was like I said in I think I said it in episode 3, because I wasn't sure. Shut up. I was hoping to lead into it. I wasn't sure about what I was like. I wasn't sure that was the story I wanted to tell. I was trying to not play to a certain market, but those were the stories that I was really into, so I was trying to tell that story. There was no rhyme or reason behind it. I was just trying to tell the story, and I wasn't sure.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, How to Cure, I know why I needed to tell that story, and I know why I need to tell other stories. But, like, for Vampire Bite, I don't know when I'm going to write Vampire Bite. It's not going to be right away.
Yeah, it's not going to be a 2021, 2022 release.
No, it might not even be 2023. Because that whole aspect is family.
Yeah.
So for How to Cure, because How to Cure is all about trauma and how to deal with trauma. Well, my formative years were full of lots of different kinds of traumas, and I had to learn how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And, like, that was one aspect of the story, and so that was something that I had to share. Well, Vampire Bite is supposed to be about family. So I'm going to have to take some time to reflect on that, and I don't know where that road's going to lead me. I really don't.
I mean, I know you...
Because I don't have a husband and I don't have children. All I have are parents and siblings.
Yeah.
So there's not... For Hope to have a husband and a child, like, I don't know how to communicate that, because there's literally no one in the world who loves me that much.
Yeah, I mean, not to, like, knock you down on a couple pegs, but, like, because, it's trauma.
By all means.
So, like, so How to Cure, it's trauma, like, because you had a lot of trauma, like you said, in your formative years, which, usually deals with a child and adolescence, but since you don't have the husband and the child, in some way you're still, I mean, you're always going to be your parents' daughter, but in some ways you're still, even though you're an adult, you're still the child in a dynamic. You're not.
Oh yeah, that's 100% accurate.
You're not a wife. You're not a mother. So like you're not going to know, especially with Hope and Graves. You're not going to know that. Being a married
couple, what it's like to be in
that dynamic.
What it's like to be in a functional marriage? No, I don't know. I don't know how to communicate that yet.
And if you're looking to ask me for advice, don't.
I'm not. Nope. You are the last person. Even if you were still married, you'd probably be the last person I ask.
Yeah. I would say no. Can I tell you? Even if I was still married, no, I'm not the person to ask. Because even when I was married and early on, that marriage was flawed. Little to no communication. So I'd be like, nah, ask one of your friends who might be married.
I don't have married friends.
Ask a sibling.
I'll ask my parents. Because, something, I could ask my parents. Because they had to deal with that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They had to be married, and they were trying to make their marriage work with 6 kids, and their kids being gradually taken away. Which, after we left, only it really only underscored the importance of the family unit.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have survived if we hadn't stuck together.
So yeah, I would say ask them, or even ask, brother or sister.
Yeah.
Just, if not to capture, because I mean, obviously, yeah, you could ask your parents, but they're more mature now as to where Hope and Graves are still young. So I would maybe ask a sibling who's a little closer to.
And they are going to be older in the next book. But, again, I'm not going to write that right away. I'm going to have to reflect on it, and I'm going to have to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. Well, it's, like you said, with, you're not going to write it right away. I mean, I came up with the idea for Arcadia in 2012, but I didn't start writing it until 2017.
I remember talking about that with you.
Because you actually used the opening.
I used the opening because it's a very reflective opening, and I used it in a paper for college, which that professor had no business letting me get away with that, but she did because she was terrible.
Oh wow. But
not that.
But yeah, no, that was. Yeah, because I wrote that because I had the idea and I was like, okay, but it was that anyway. But yeah, there was 2012 is when I originally had the idea for Arcadia, and then like I said, I didn't start writing it until 5 years later. So I don't blame you if you don't wait, or if you don't start on Vampire Bite until maybe 3 to 5 years after publishing.
Well, and that just gives me room to work on some of the other projects that I have, like Fisherman, or
Shiver.
Shiver, or the horror anthology.
Oh yeah, that too.
Sagarmatha. The one with the judge.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different, again, it's that overactive imagination. There's a lot of different projects up here that are fleshing themselves out. Just some of them aren't going to be here for a while.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. It just increases the pressure to do something. Okay, but let's actually take a break here.
Okay.
We both need to come up for air.